And so we find ourselves at the end of another season of The Uncle Show. So called because YouTube hates the word review. And with that, it's time for another big video. And this time, we're going to a special little blue feller. Possibly my all-time favorite Transformer, Soundwave. What is it with Soundwave that makes him so wonderful? Is it the silver, blue, and yellow color scheme, which is just immediately lovely? Is it his giant Gatling gun on his shoulder that I don't think he ever used in the original show? Is it his sing-songy voice, his personality, or the fact he turns into a tape deck, which the more dated it is, the more immediately charming it is? Who knows? He's a lot like Boba Fett. It's not the extremely outward things he does, it's that he just has a presence that's felt as soon as he's in a scene. So for today, I'm going to be talking about 10 different Soundwaves across different eras of Transformers. Now, just to clarify, these are not all of them. These may not even be the best one. And definitely not in some cases. These are just 10 Soundwaves across 40 years of Transformers. So why don't we start with the original from 1984? Or 2024, because this is a re-release.
Soundwave Superior.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the 40th anniversary of Transformers, we have the original Soundwave. This right here might be the same mold as the original, but there are a couple of differences. For one, there's no stickers like the original, and the original purple color scheme has been swapped to a more tune-accurate blue. I do miss the yellow visor he had on the original toy, though. And his missile launcher doesn't actually shoot missiles, which sucks, but otherwise, this is the original toy. And it must be said, for the time, Soundwave is incredible. I have several G1 figures now, and let me tell you, none of them are as posable as this guy. For 1984, you got head, gun, kinda shoulder, and slight knee articulation. Is it still crazy limited? Oh hell yeah! But when you consider that most other Transformers settled on just arm articulation most of the time, while this guy can sit with his legs splayed out, Soundwave here is practically a masterpiece compared to them. But not one of those. We're saving that for later. And his design is perfectly wide and chunky too. He's like a big old doughboy, but still feels intimidating and full-bodied. He doesn't feel like a robot with bits of car on him. Still looks incredibly clean. And of course, he's got his distinguishing feature, his tapes, which form little animals with Ravage and Laserbeak here. That's 3 Transformers in one pack. Must have been an amazing toy back then, and it's still super charming. It also feels wonderful too, with that chunky plastic and a little bit of die-cast metal in his feet, and his tapes that just feel weighty and nice. Transformation couldn't be simpler. You see in the intro, you know how it goes. It all snaps together. Maybe it's not as smooth as it would be now, like with the joints you gotta click in, but it still feels incredibly good to do so. And the result is this excellent tape player. I love this thing so much. It's got that 80s Japanese electronics aesthetic. Big, bulky, brightly colored plastic with heavy ridging. It's wonderful. And being that it's a Diaclone mold, it has a lot of little things to make it feel more like a tape player. From his volume rocker, to the little headphone jack on one switch, to the fact his guns are stored as batteries inside of his case, to the fact said case has a clip for hooking around your waist so you can pretend you're listening to it on the go. God, this is wonderful! This is one of those figures I can transform all day if I wanted to. It's just that good. It's so simple, fun to mess with, that it feels timeless. I grew up in the early 2000s RID Unicron trilogy and movie eras, where by then there were figures with much better articulation, bigger sizes, etc. But Soundwave feels timeless. Somehow fits right in no matter where he goes. Okay, maybe not everywhere, but you know what I mean. I think it's how Soundwave has been re-released at least 8 times since the original toy, despite his flaws. He always feels welcome. It's true what they say. Soundwave's certainly better than the other ones. Though I guess it is a little frustrating in some cases, like for classics, where everyone got really solid updates with new articulation, while Soundwave was stuck with his original mold. Well, luckily for him, Soundwave got a brand new figure in the mid-2000s that's still a tape player and heavily G1 inspired. Only problem was, it was a titanium figure. So yeah, the next mold for Soundwave's tape player form was unfortunately titanium. I already reviewed the Optimus Prime from this line, and those dogs are away, mate. It wasn't very good. Soundwave fares a bit better than him, and I'll start with the positives at least. I can recognize it as Soundwave. The idea of Soundwave is there at least. And there are some touches I actually quite like. I like his more angled V visor, something that works really well on other versions of him. I adore the fact his guns are stored away in his back like a pair of batteries like before. And the gold trim on the outside of his tape door is a much more prominent gold, and I actually quite like the look of it. It draws your attention in, which is good, because it draws you away from... Yeah, let's address that diaper. On top of making him look like he should be posted to Fur Affinity, it's just insanely distracting. His crotch is almost as big as his chest, which I'm sure is great for the ladybots out there, but it just looks horrifying here. And these proportions... What is going on here? Why does he have such tiny arms? What's with these giant legs? Why does he seemingly have no waist? And no, the diaper doesn't count. Not helping matters is the die-cast metal ruining this figure. With Optimus, it was the arms. This time, it's the legs, which you'd think would work well as die-cast in legs is pretty common. But here, the legs have a kind of piston effect for transforming him, and as a result, he is comically imbalanced at all times. Holy crap, he really is a baby, even toddling around like one. Not helping is the fact his feet are on the edge of his legs rather than on it. There are kinda knee joints on this, and those do help, but essentially means he's gonna be squatting like he's taking a crap at all times. Maybe that's what the diaper is for. And while the rest of the articulation on the upper body is serviceable, other than no upper waist turning, again, the legs let it down because they're too heavy to do any posing. Also, if you move one of them in just the wrong way, you're left with the worst noise ever. The transformation is straightforward enough and easy to figure out. Nothing bad there, and the end result, I will say, is not bad. He's been modernized into a boombox with big ghetto blasting speakers, though they kinda look like those speakers everyone had on their computer in the 90s. I can't fault it though, it's a simple radio and that's all Soundwave needed to be, but man, this figure is such a mess. And like I said, this was one of the first new Soundwave designs of him being a radio since the 80s. But it wasn't the only one that was out at the time.
Our worlds are in danger.
In 2005, Hasbro and Takara brought Soundwave into the world of the Cybertron anime, with a bit of heavy reworking. Instead of being a tape player, he's a plane, and well, just look at him. Isn't he just gorgeous? His original color scheme, loud and proud, but just been Cybertronified. Cybertron was already great for taking already established characters and giving them amazing makeovers with a healthy heaping of sci-fi gubbins, and Soundwave might be one of the most extreme cases of that. I thought Titanium had upped the flashiness of his gold, but Cybertron here makes him look like even more of a peasant, with even more gold and a gold faceplate like he was wearing one of Nelly's grills. Wow, this really is the mid-2000s. Right down to the crazy amount of gimmicks. We have ourselves some light piping, and the Planet Key gimmick of launching a tape, or bomb in this case, and the bombs themselves transform into both his weapons and Laserbeak. This is what was so great about Cybertron. It had gimmicks, but it rarely got in the way of the toy itself. This has the same joint placement as Titanium, but he can actually pull off the poses. And it's traded in his diaper for some kick-ass hooker boots. He's just so... oh, what do the kids say these days? Oh yeah, vagina-y. Transformation is a little clunky. Just doesn't fit quite as well as it could be, though I do love smacking his body down to form the plane. And this plane, oh, I love it so much. It's a sci-fi version of one of those Nighthawk stealth planes, which doesn't that make way too much sense for Soundwave? He was never the most combative type, he was always doing espionage and communications, and would usually send his pets to combat. So making him the espionagist of espionage vehicles is just perfect for him. And I love the bomb dropping gimmick of the plane mode. It's so goofy, but I love it. Cybertron Soundwave showed you could do a new mode for Soundwave and pull it off. Yeah, there are plenty of planes in the Decepticons already, but they're all fighter jets or space junk. Soundwave being a stealth plane was the perfect fit for him. Shame they keep making him a car.
Cars?
So even though they already had one of the most perfectly fitting vehicles for Soundwave, they decided no and opted to make him a car. But like not even a car that makes sense, like a James Bond style car, like a luxurious but not over the top style of spy car. No, they make him a big bulky SUV constantly. And I just can't stand them. But I had to showcase one, so I opted for Cyberverse here. Cyberverse as a show was a fun one, and one of the biggest things it did right was the art direction. On top of the surprisingly good CGI for a web series, almost every design they pull off in this show works. I think it's because they went with a let's take G1 and make it toony approach, in a way that enhances their character traits, but still feels recognizable. I can't really think of a bad design really off the top of my head. Starscream, love it. Grimlock, love it. Windblade, love it. Bumblebee, love it. Swoop, love it, but give me an actual figure instead of this abomination. And Soundwave was one of my favorite designs featured. Still familiar, but with some lovely new touches. I love his oscilloscope shoulders that fluctuated whenever he talked. His even more angular visor, his little radar dish, I love it all. Now Warrior class Soundwave here, you can forgive for certain aspects. After all, this is meant to be cheaper than a deluxe, but it's still unfortunate that his legs are missing the silver featured so prominently on his character. I'll even forgive his hilariously hollow legs here as they're for the transformation. Though it does mark the return of leg piping. Because, to be honest, it's still a pretty functional toy with plenty of articulation in the arms and legs, though sadly none of the waist again or the head, meaning his after workout stretches aren't going to go well. And the gimmick this time around is rather fun. Rather than a Laserbeak cassette, there's a bit of a twist this time when you turn his head. Pow! Laserbeak jump scare. I kinda love it. It's different but comes out with such force.
Oh god, I shouldn't have eaten at Five Guys. Ugh.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
Though storing this bird does mean he has a backpack just as big as he is. Though at least this guy can stand up, unlike Schmorky Wave. Transformation is nice and simple. I mean, it is aimed more at kids, so it makes sense. And I do think it is hilarious that Soundwave's head is hidden by the gun. When turned around enough, he's giving off big Energon Ironhide vibes. But here's the problem. It's still a car, and not even a cool one. It's your mom's SUV on your way to pick you up from soccer practice, and admonish you for not playing hard out there even though she wasn't there for most of it, and I don't even like soccer in the first place, and your younger sibling is just staring awkwardly as she yells at you, "Please stop yelling at me, Mom!" It's just so unfitting to the character. Like I said, he wasn't a big combative type. Also, why won't Laserbeak come out the rear? I want him to crap out Laserbeak on his enemies.
Welcome to Earth.
And now we move on to Earthspark, which I have been enjoying quite a bit, but it can be kind of all over the place. Like the backgrounds are beautifully realistic and rendered, and then they have comic book effects that look really out of place. It's trying to be its own thing, but sometimes feels like a sequel to G1. Some of the humans are realistic but stylized, while others look like Star Wars Rebel characters, and some look like Cocomelon escapees. And the robot designs are even more all over the place, because whereas Cyberverse was what if G1 with Toonish edge, Earthspark wanted to be everything. Some look more akin to G1, some look like they're from Prime. Prime himself has an ugly face. A lot of characters feel recycled from Cyberverse because they wanted to use those molds for the toy line, which they did. There's a robot named Hashtag now. I swear the show is good, and there are some really good designs. Now the toy line, whoo! Earthspark's toy line is pretty dire. As mentioned before, a good chunk of the toy line were remolds from Cyberverse, and very few decent new figures. And they were even more reliant on gimmicks this time around. There are those god-awful ring transformers, and it was so bad. The largest size classes were essentially Voyager figures with a spinning halfway transformation gimmick that also came with figures of the two kids, and it's reminding me a little too much of Kiss players, so this immediately can go die. And unfortunately, the only figure of Soundwave from the show is a crap one-step changer. Oh god. If you've never seen these before, or as it says on the tin, you pull the figure down and boom, it's a robot. But press the button and boom, it's a vehicle. Yay. And they're alright as little fidgety toys, but the fact that this is the only figure of Soundwave in this form is frustrating. Especially because Soundwave was one of the best designs in the show. Recognizable while still being his own guy, with an awesome Viking helmet, a crotch visor, and him turning into a stealth bomber is absolutely perfect form for him. But no, the only figure of this version of him is this unarticulated, stumpy lump. It's especially sad because Cyberverse had some one-step changers that had articulation in the arms, or even extra gimmicks to go with them. Not this guy. So why don't we move on to something less controversial? The movies!
I've come.
I probably mentioned this before, but I weirdly adored the design language in the Bay movies. Something about these very out there busy designs actually really appeals to me. They're just so visceral and off the wall and pretty inventive, while only sometimes looking like the character. Now, Soundwave in Revenge of the Fallen didn't do a crazy amount, only showing off his satellite mode, which honestly is a really clever way of updating him, where he does his communication thing voiced by Frank Welker again, and then violates another satellite in a movie with a surprising amount of humping. But the funny thing is, sometimes the toys get to concept art before the final design, and as a result, we have a Soundwave that's surprisingly a little more loyal to how he normally looks. Obviously, he's still got that signature Bay touch, but the head and color scheme is a little more recognizably Soundwave, with possibly the most angry visor yet. In a movie full of angry characters, Soundwave might be angriest yet. We also get a return of the gold trim surrounding his 3 breasts like he's auditioning for Total Recall. He's also a brawny little guy, only being a deluxe, but look at those shoulders, man. Bro should have been playing for the Chicago Bears, not destroying their city. This is a showcase of where I think the Bay design language is at its strongest. Clearly taking from the originals, but adding a fun, chaotic twist to it. And we also get our first proper missile of the video. Took us long enough. Great thing about Revenge of the Fallen as well is that as a toy line, it has some of the best Transformer toys ever made. Spectacular alt modes, gimmickry, experimental designs, gorgeous detail, and plenty of articulation. But this guy's no different, being seriously posable. Just brimming with play value and still fitting in with even Studio Series figures with all the detail in his face. He can chill with the pack. The transformation is a bit of a pain, it's just a bit fiddly with lots of bits hanging around, but the final results are awesome with surprisingly distinct satellite and jet modes with articulation for them. This is the type of space junk I love, looking genuinely intimidating while still recognizable as a vehicle. A bit of a bummer that the missile doesn't fire out front, but hey, at least he can crap on his enemies like Carwave couldn't. But enough of these weird offshoots. I want a modernized update of the original Soundwave, with great articulation, his cassette bay, all of it. And we got it, but...
Disappointed!
So, this fella, huh? Transformers Siege in hindsight was an odd series. Like, it had some incredible figures released for it, like Omega Supreme, Shockwave, Ultra Magnus, and more. But it's also the birthplace of Siege Megatron, aka why people hate tank Megatrons these days. And the whole battle damage motif sounded kinda neat at first, but ended up looking rather ugly a lot of the time. And it's there that this lad was introduced with Voyager Soundwave, or rather this is his legacy version which removes the battle damage, so it's superior. So, on first glance, this should be everything I wanted. A modernized update on Soundwave with everything that comes with modern Transformer toys now. The figure is extremely posable, capable of doing so much, and design-wise, it's a phenomenal body. It's what I want a Soundwave to be. Bulky but not cumbersome. Arm to the teeth, it's great. And the head sculpt is the cartoon brought to life just with the glorious return of his yellow visor from the G1 toy with light piping. And even some of the new additions like the little flip-up turrets are kind of a neat addition. But I just can't like it. The texture on this thing for one. I know that the whole cybery texture was a big thing for the Siege figures and it worked well on some, but others just looked like they had a horrifying skin condition. Have you ever seen some of Pat Lee's art for Transformers where he just adds a lot of random vents and such to the robots, resulting in looking like they have leprosy? That's this guy. He feels like I'll catch something. Also, the color has been made this overly dark purple that to my eyes makes him look almost completely blacked out. So you can't even appreciate all the detailing that's on display. He doesn't even come with any of his tapes. But that's not what angers me the most. You see that backpack? That's a bit different, right? It's clearly not going to be a boombox. Or even a car. So what does he turn into? What in the good name of is that? What the hell is this supposed to be? I know people call the Bayformers a bunch of sci-fi noise, but they're at least something. This is sci-fi lounge music. Just a load of nothing. When I first saw this, I thought it was supposed to be like a laser blaster, kind of like how Siege Shockwave can be held to look like a gun. But no, this is apparently a spaceship. Really? That teeny tiny, smaller than a Lego stud piece there? That's the cockpit apparently. Because Shockwave is being piloted by frickin' ants. There wasn't even a good transformation. It's very fiddly, parts keep pinging off, and due to this thing's awful design, the instructions are actually a bit confusing. I've seen plenty of bad alt modes, but they at least look like something. This is nothing. I've seen plenty of spaceship transformers. I have plenty of spaceship transformers. This is no spaceship. This is just a load of shit. It's so bad, it actively brings down the figure with it. Because no matter what, you're reminded of what this thing turns into. It takes what could have been an amazing figure of Soundwave and actively ruins it. You know what? Enough of this. Fred, get rid of it! Good thing a few years later they fixed them. Now this is what I'm talking about. This is such a massive improvement, it's not even funny. You might notice a couple of changes, but nothing major. Just the shoulders, arms, crotch, legs, back, and even a lot of the torso. It's such a massive fix. Not that the original Siege figure was awful. Okay, it kind of was, but this is just so much cleaner, so much more polished looking. That Siege detailing is gone, and thank goodness. He's got a lot more metal bits, the plastic is much more of a pronounced purple. The only thing I miss really is the yellow visor. I know the red is more cartoon accurate, but I just think that it looked nice. And say goodbye to that bulky backpack. You just don't need it with Soundwave. Though sadly for his front controls, they're this kind of bulky belt now, which doesn't look the best and feels a little bit cheaty for the transformation. Though I do wish they took the chance to up the articulation a bit. The arms feel a bit more limited compared to before, probably because they're accounting for the transformation. There's a bit of a snap with them, which is odd. You can still work with them, but it feels a bit limiting. Also, I do wish they used the chance to put some ankle pivots on, just a bit. But otherwise, this is such an improvement over this. The transformation for Soundwave is good fun. It's that classic split the legs, move the arms around, hide the head, all lovely, no complaint. But the tape player on the other hand, it's fine but not the best. It's still as charming as ever, but compared to other radios we've seen in this video, it's slightly lacking. Like the back is just a complete mess. Come on, that's just unsightly. And that crotch panel just looks ugly jetting out. I feel like it should have been able to sit flush. In fact, there's a hole on his crotch where it should plug in. But nope, just sticking out. It's a fine alt mode, but compared to others, it could have been better. But there's a big redeeming factor. This is a leader class figure despite still being a Voyager. Now I bet you're already going, oh boy, another Voyager upscaled by accessories. But unlike some figures where you just get a trailer and some extra weapons, Soundwave comes with 3 cassettes, essentially meaning he comes with 3 mini Transformers. I know Soundwave normally comes with Laserbeak, it's why I haven't mentioned it too much, but it coming with 3 and one of them essentially being a core class figure really helps this out. Buzzsaw is rather nice being your classic bird cassette, Ravage is okay, the transformation is kind of a pain actually, but Rumble here really brings the package up a notch. Being around core class size, the fact that humanoid Transformer can turn into a cassette is still pretty fun, but of course he comes with laser guns and big old smattering rams to complete the package. And he's impressively posable for his size. These 3 being bundled together really helps this figure out. And again, even if he is $15 extra, he's still leagues above this. But what if he was smaller? Now we come to the little miracle that is War for Cybertron Kingdom Core Class Soundwave. And when you consider when he came out, we had that star shit to deal with, and no, I'm not going to stop making fun of it. This is wonderful. I adore core class figures, and Soundwave here is, God, I love him. In comparison to the purple leprosy that was all over his Voyager counterpart, this Soundwave opts for a much cleaner look, akin to his look in the cartoon, but there's still a good amount of detail on it to keep it from being visually boring. Features-wise, he packs quite a punch too. The articulation is on ball joints, and other than no waist articulation, he's as good as his larger counterpart. He even comes with his own mini cassette. It doesn't transform, but come on, this is adorable. The transformation's so simple, I was able to figure it out without looking at the manual. It's a near perfect replication of his old toy, just with modern articulation. The only problem is the feet are a little obvious here. I know there's a way to fix them via third-party means, but that's practically nothing. I already adore core figures, and this to me is them at their best. I could transform this thing all day. It's practically a fidget toy. A better fidget toy than the one-step changer, and for the same price. You can't complain in the slightest. It's everything I could want out of a smaller size figure of Soundwave. But it still isn't quite right. If only we had a perfect Soundwave. Something that just perfectly captures everything about him. A masterpiece, if you would.
It's a fucking masterpiece!
In 2013, we first got our hands on Masterpiece Soundwave. Standing as the tallest Soundwave I've showcased so far, I actually bought him around 2014, hence why he might be a bit dusty. Sorry about that. Now, truth be told, I'm not super into Masterpiece figures normally. Like, a lot of them are awesome quality, most of the time. But if I wanted to collect them, I'd have to start all over, and that'd get really expensive, and oftentimes they feel a little bit over-engineered with some really painful transformations. And with them lately trying to copy the cartoon style, feels a bit redundant because we already have smaller, more affordable versions of them. But this guy, man, just look at him. He's gorgeous. This is probably the most perfectly proportioned Soundwave yet. Perfectly mimicking his cartoon form with a healthy dosing of the original toy's purple for a very distinct look. And even adding some lovely extra details like the gold arrow in the tape player, lovely silver shoulder pads, and these great ridges makes it feel way more like a piece of 80s tech. All with the best posability so far. Truly a capable figure. You also get a return to sensible die-cast metal with the legs, meaning he stands tall no matter what. Unfortunately, his guns are stored directly on his back rather than in his battery compartment. And they don't really like to stay in sometimes. Also, no belt clips. Boo! How am I supposed to pretend this thing's a Walkman now? But those are such small points. This thing just feels so great to pose and is so visually clean and tidy. This is the kind of toy kids in the 80s could only dream of. The transformation is fiddly, but great. Because unlike a lot of other Soundwaves where you can figure out the transformation immediately, here there are a few extra steps to make it work, and it's still really fun. It's a masterpiece figure where I don't need to whip out a manual for. Close to the original, but now instead of click, clunk, done, there are a few extra bits, but still easy to figure out. Compared to some masterpiece figures, I'll happily take it. And I do love this cassette player. It really does fit the Walkman bill so nicely, including an on switch that has a bit of resistance so it actually feels like you're powering it on. Just kidding. There's no actual electrics, but God, it feels so nice. And the buttons on the front can be pressed, but only fast forward and rewind, so your options for music are limited unless you want nothing but Nightcore. It's funny, I started writing this script before I got Leader Legacy Soundwave, and I thought that was going to knock it out of the park, but writing the script and fiddling with this made me realize more and more how good Masterpiece Soundwave is. Look, there are plenty of good looking Masterpiece figures, but this is the best to me. Loyal to the cartoon, but takes enough inspiration from the original toy to still feel fresh. He's just a masterpiece, no other way of putting it. And there we go, that was 10 Soundwaves across several decades and styles. Some were good, some were bad, but regardless, Soundwave remains one of my favorite Transformers ever. It's funny, across all of these different designs, he still remains remarkably recognizable. Whether he's a clunky but lovable toy from the 80s, a high-end collector's figure, Soundwave remains Soundwave, and Soundwave superior. Except for Transformers Animated. What are you doing there? But let me ask you, which was your favorite Soundwave? Do you have a favorite outside of this bunch? Let me know in the comments, please subscribe, and thank you for watching Season 2 of The Uncle Show. See y'all next time.
Put a tree in your butt, put a bubble bee in your butt.